I want to do a very quick status update, especially on Pharo 4. So one thing that one always needs to see, and this talk is will be apparent, is that we did a lot of small fixes and improvements, but listing them is always a bit boring, and even going through all the list takes a while. We will do that when we release, but I didn't look at the 1,200 closed issues before doing this presentation. So that means not everything is visible, and I will not mention even everything. So Pharo 4 will be released sometime spring. We need to discuss what we do, if we release it early and without some stuff, or if we wait a little bit and try to finish some things more until July, so we will discuss that later. We have 467 updates until now, which is a little bit less than we had last year, but then for Pharo 3 we did really a lot of stuff. And one of the reasons is that for some subsystems we now do bigger updates. So for example, one of the things that we added were the new tools, the GT system, and that was just 2 issues and to integrate it in the first version, and one update actually, instead of building it step by step and considering of hundreds of commits. So that's good, but it was a bit less issues closed all in all. But nevertheless, 1,200 issues that we looked at on the issue tracker until now. And the nice thing is it's very stable to be used actually. So that's something that was actually quite interesting, that even though we changed a lot, it stayed always quite usable. So we never had a phase where the system was unusable for a longer time than a day or 2, which is nice. And even that was very seldom the case. We improved a lot of things. So for example, the refactorings were improved. We now build in the normal build process after each update. We build a 6 megabyte deployment image, which is stripped down from the normal distribution, which is quite nice. One nice small but fun change is that now all the optimizations that the compiler does for control structures, they are now all transparent. So that's very nice. It used to be that when you teach Smalltalk, you explain to people how even control structures are methods, and then the students get really say, oh, that's cool, and the best students, or those that like it a lot, they say, oh, that means I can make my own Boolean class, let's do that. So then they make my Boolean and implement if true, and nothing goes. And then you need to explain, yeah, in theory, if true is a message, but internally we generate a jump and it doesn't work. And then they are really, really upset because this nice language is not nice anymore, because it's just, that's wrong. Yeah. And so what we now do is actually that when you call if true on a non-Boolean, then you get a runtime error. That was always the case. And now when the runtime error is raised, it actually looks at the method that raised the error, takes this expression that raised the error, builds a new method, compiles it with auto-optimization and executes it. And that happens completely transparently. So that means that you can now call if true on your own Boolean, and it will just work. It's a bit slower because it compiles a method every time, which if we start to use it a lot, we would need to cache. But it works. And that's really nice. And people already started to use that. So we had one bug report on the mailing list where someone said, yeah, in my DSL I implemented max, I think now and, which is optimized like if true, and it works, but not if the parameter is a block with an argument. And the reason is that in that case the compiler was checking, because it checked to optimize this construct, and it was actually trying to help the user because it knew that max with an argument was wrong. But the fun thing is, after removing that, boom, everything worked. And it's really nice. So it opens up a lot of possibilities, like proxies that stand in for objects, which could be even a Boolean and things like that. Very nice. So we continue to clean up the tools a bit, mostly the API between the tools and how they are managed. And we did very early a cleanup very deep in the system between method context and context part to merge everything into one class, which is nice. And we did did some nice things. So one was the dark theme of Esteban that was integrated very early in Pharo 4. You can load it in Pharo 3, but it works. And that's very nice. A lot of people use that, and it looks very much in line with other IDEs that people use these days with dark themes. So very nice. A big chunk, and the next talk is about that, so I will not talk too much about it, is GT, which is the beginning of a complete new tool infrastructure for Pharo. We integrated until now the GT Inspector, which is a new inspector framework, and the Spotter, which is a search engine, which is very nice. If you have not yet used it, you should. It's very nice and very extensible for your own objects and classes. Then one big chunk is a new text model, which is added to Pharo 4. It's not yet used anywhere, but it's there as a preview so that people can start to have a look and start to improve it and see what needs to be done so that we can start to use it. Another thing that we added is first-class variables. So already in Pharo 3, behind every instance variable there is an object. So there is a definition object in the class. It's not used too much, but it's behind. And in Pharo 4, we now can actually use that. You can, if you want to do experiments, then you can actually redefine what a variable is, so what it does on read and write. So you can subclass the instance variable or the global variable and implement your own behavior. And so this is now exposed in the system. So you can define classes with special instance variables, save them in Monticello, load them back, things like that. And it has already been used for experiments for a graphic or kind of morphic system with ports and events. Then we have things in progress, which we need to see if we add them to Pharo 4 or to Pharo 5, depending on planning. One is Epicea, which is a new model for the changes, so for what you do in your system, which works on a much higher level, so you can aggregate changes and model refactoring, so that you see, this was a refactoring, you rename and add of a method. And it can be it's serialized to disk, but it's independent of the .changes and the .sources, and that means that if we move to this change model, we can actually later rethink the way that we model source code in the system. Because right now with the .sources and .changes, it's a bit cumbersome. Because, for example, if you load a package, then it always needs to write the source code into the .changes file, and if you unload it, then it still stays in the .changes file. So if you unload and reload the package multiple times, then the changes file grows and grows and grows, and it's very slow to write and not really nice. So if we add this model, this change model to the system, afterwards we can rethink how sources are managed. And another thing that we are working on, which after the slots now are mostly finished, will be my focus again, is to improve the reflection capabilities of the language and to build a very nice breakpoint system on top of that. That will be quite nice. So you will be able to annotate any structural element in the language with a meta object, which can change what the language element does. So for example, if you have an instance variable, then you can annotate it with a meta object that says if you are written in X. Quite powerful. So I think we will use that a lot, especially for tools and for research and things like breakpoint. Then there is a lot of VM-related news, which is not yet used in the Pharo that you download, but which is in active development, and there will be a talk, I think, tomorrow about that. So that there is the new garbage collector that Elliot designed and implemented, which is very nice. So this speeds up the system for normal benchmarks by nearly, so it doubles nearly the performance of a normal Pharo system, and it has some nice features like pinned object and ephemerons, and become will get very fast with this system, which in turn means that we can use that for real stuff, like proxies and futures and things like that. And there is a 64-bit version in active development, which will, of course, then allow really big images to be built, which will be very nice. Yeah, so that was my small Pharo 4 update. I did not mention a lot of things. So, for example, there is the I don't know if you have seen that. If you get a DNU, there is now another button in the pre-debug window which says report, and which is the Shoreline reporting system, which actually sends the text that it shows of the stack trace to a central server, and then we will use that information to analyze where people have problems in the system. So every time you get a debugger popping up in Pharo 4, you can submit that, and we will then visualize that information and see statistically where the problems are in the system, where the bugs are, and even can then analyze if the problems that this system was catching was relate to a bug entry later that shows that. So that is quite nice. So, do you have any questions? Time? We have still some minutes.
Yeah, I have one. Can you extrapolate a bit more the Epicea feature? Because I'm aware of this.
Yeah. So the idea that so right now we use the standard Smalltalk way of saving source code. So that means there is a .sources file and a .values file, and this is used for once to store the source code. So that means that every method has a pointer to so if it's positive it's one file, if it's negative it's the other file, so an offset pointer in one of the two files. So that means that they store the source code of the system, so that it doesn't need to be in memory. And then the reason why there is a .changes and a .source is that the .changes, it gets appended to everything that you do gets appended to that file. And when your system crashes out of some reason, then you do not lose all your code that you have not yet committed, because every time you save a method, it's saved there. So it's a really nice transaction of what you do. You don't need it often, but if you manage to destroy your system by either the VM crashes or you develop Pharo itself and you destroy your browser and or your compiler and you cannot do anything anymore, then this is very handy that this is there. So we want to keep that. But it's a very low-level model, so it's about methods and classes being changed. And the Epicea model goes more puts it on a higher level, so it models changes as objects and allows to model change on a much higher level, in the sense, so for example, if you do a refactoring on the .changes file, this is just a lot of methods that get added and removed, and you don't know what it was. But Epicea, you can actually model, this is refactoring X, and it has the following sub changes, and that's very nice for the end user, because if you then look at your history, then you really see what you did.
It rather records user actions than some very small changes like method changes. So it records like, okay, user loaded package. So that's an action. So it focuses on actions.
Yeah.
How is that information shared amongst multiple people in a team?
Right now, this is purely a local change model. So the idea is that it for now replaces the local .changes mechanism and a tool to understand change. So if you load something, you can look at it in a nice way. How to use it. So it does not replace the Monticello level of sharing code, for example, or things like that.
And does it use an object database?
No.
Right now it's not in a database, it's filed out in a text file. It uses, I think right now, Ston to It's a bit the same idea like doc changes, only that it uses a bit more high-level format. And of course, it provides possibilities in that direction. So you could actually think about storing this forever and not deleting it with your system. Yeah.
Yes. Could it be linked with package version so that when we save a package on this, we also have the Epicea record of the changes between versions?
So link it with package information. So maybe Martin can explain that.
Maybe we can discuss. I don't understand well, but we can.
Basically, take the Epicea changes, look at what are the ones that apply to the new package version you're saving, and saving it along, saying it's metadata of the package. So that it shows in the package that you've done refactoring, then another version you did another one, like renaming things in the class and these sort of things. So that it's not lost as a local change, but it can be shared between the teams.
Yes, I'm working in something in that direction here. We can discuss more later.
Okay. Anything else?
Maybe it's too early, but when we go to Pharo 4, will there be like a freeze and then a longer test period?
There should be, yes. So normally what we do, but we did always the last years, was to freeze around 2 to 3 months before the release. And freeze means to be quite strict with new features and big changes of the system, and to only allow bugs to be fixed. So for Pharo 3 we did that. So we froze, I think, semi-froze in December, and then for real in January, and then we really only fixed bugs for quite a long time. So we need to do that again. So normally, if we want to release in end of March, then we should be in freeze now. If you look at the changes that we do, then there's actually not that many grave changes right now. So there are lots of bug fixes that people do, and cleanups. So with cleanups in a real freeze, we need to get more strict too, of course. But we didn't do too many really grave changes the last months. There were some compiler-related changes, and the slots things are kind of base system changes, but it's already relatively.
And it takes some time for certain packages to move from 3 to 4.
That too, yeah, exactly. To tell people you should now use it. It's the one that we will release, but it's not yet released. That we should do, and then people can get feedback and you can integrate.
But there's actually no reason to not already create the Pharo 4 versions.
Yeah, and that's what they did with Moose already, right?
Yeah, Moose moved, so they released the Pharo 3 version before Christmas, and they now moved to Pharo 4 for development. So they
somehow the old effort moved, the entire move from Pharo 3 to Pharo 4 was 1 or 2 mandates. Spread over a week maybe, but it wasn't so much better.
Should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
Just so, so I